Hi, Yolandi.
Hi, Tanya. How are you? How do you feel from yesterday?
Oh, you know, what can you feel? It's such a complex and kind of legally entangled matter. I know that feelings are really high, and very strong, and rightly so. There were a lot of people, a lot of people that have been impacted by a case like this in this country because it's so rare. And a lot of people had a lot of hopes pinned on some kind of an outcome, I guess, that would make a statement. And that they've been very, very badly disappointed. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was standing on the outside and I saw the disappointment in some people's eyes, and especially seeing their reaction from Brett, which I can understand. I don't think you really will ever get over the pain of something, as badly as what's happened to him. But overall, I think people were just hoping and wishing that there would be some sort of justice. And even if it was a guilty verdict, he doesn't need to go to jail necessarily, just some sort of like, I guess, closure for people. But, it hasn't happened, as with a lot of these things, which is a shame.
Well, the age of the concealer, the person that looks away or enables or arranges, a la Epstein kind of
Mm,
situation. That, R. Kelly, the same thing, those people's is coming. Well, so this was definitely a start, but time and time again you read and hear from victims of institutional abuse, child sexual abuse, that what we call systems abuse, where the systems, the court systems, the child
mm,
protection system, legal system, the
yeah.
police, or, health systems, when they let people down, it's sometimes worse for people. It's definitely a re-abuse, and it's
No, it is. I can definitely see that. I mean, my situation is minor, but I mean, I look at the situation where I myself and quite a few different students brought up a matter with the compliance ombudsman for education, and they just didn't even interview any of us, and they just went straight and said, no, Hillsong hasn't done anything wrong, but without
absolutely.
actually doing proper investigations. It's just like it's very strange. Yeah, it's just a thing of like, why is it not being investigated? If you've got 20 complaints, you should at least do the due diligence of putting together a
Well,
case manager. And yeah.
it does. You and I have had some conversations about a conspiracy theory here or there, but wonder when
It
various
does.
government organizations come up with the
Oh,
same.
constantly, yeah. And there's so many complaints. You've still got a student group that's still filled with students that never got any response back from
Mm.
any of their complaints, and it was met with more fear mongering and from Hillsong themselves. And it's just, yeah, it's just bizarre because it does feel to me that even though Albanese has taken over, we also have to understand from a political spectrum that a lot of Scott Morrison's old buddies are still in charge in
Yeah,
places, in high rich places.
and
And
influence as well. But let's
yeah,
not
100%.
too
Yeah.
spooky too early. Unfortunately, though, and no offense, but we we live in a country where the population is what, 26 million or something, and the groups of people in power are very small
Yeah,
relative.
it is. They all know each other as well. Coming from someone that I worked with government officials,
Well,
quite a few high.
be that in the legal profession or in the
Mm,
media or whatever. So, yeah, Brian Houston was found not guilty yesterday of the crime of failing to report a serious indictable offence to the
mm,
police, that being his father's pedophilia, particularly for the purposes of this trial, his father's child sexual abuse of Brett Sengstock, who had given testimony during the trial,
yeah.
and that those offences took place. I believe the charge type the charge time covered the period 1969 to 1974, and the failure to report without a reasonable excuse was from a period of 1999, I believe September, until 2004 when his father, Frank Houston, died.
Yeah.
So there was one charge of concealing a serious indictable offence, and it is a lot more complex because the laws were changed in 2018 to increase the severity of the case. And I'm not going to get legal right now, but just as an intro. So overall, as I said, there were a few factors the judge took. Judge Gareth Christophe, and quite the pronunciation, took nearly 2 hours to deliver a verdict yesterday. He went through basically a recap of what had been presented in court as evidence and various things that he then had to look at following that. So, this and this arose, and I had to give myself the directive A, B, and C in order to make a decision. And he was very straightforward. There wasn't a whole lot of emotion attached. That's not common from what I'm told. The overall result was that Brian had a reasonable excuse not to report the serious indictable offence, then he had to be found not guilty. But it was, sorry, let me just think clearly. Under the legislation in New South Wales in Australia, it is an offence not to report a serious indictable offence unless you have a reasonable excuse. So, if I know that, you've committed a murder, but you've told me I'm next, if I say anything, then, maybe I'm not going to. If you're in fear for your life, that's a reasonable excuse.
Yeah.
If the victim themselves did not want police involvement, that's a reasonable excuse if they're an adult at the time. And so that was pretty much the essence of the trial. Did Brian believe that Brett Sengstock, the complainant, had not wanted police involvement? And the judge found that he could not find beyond reasonable doubt that Brian had ignored Brett's request to go to police and had instead concealed it. And, it came down to reasonable doubt. There was no very strong evidence that, that Brian had disregarded Brett Sengstock's wishes. Now, that's a very long and convoluted thing, and I do have a wonderful a criminal law specialist coming to help us on leaving Hillsong very soon. But point is, Brian came out of that not guilty. Now, I was in that courtroom. There were, fair enough, there were some happy expressions or something from Houston's. I'm a little bit upset because you can see very clearly that the siblings have been told not to speak to me, like Graham and me. Like, I thought we were getting on like buddies and that, do you know what I mean? Like the brother and stuff. I thought, going to be the headway, but he's obviously been told to avoid me. Like his sister, it was a nephew that accidentally shook my hand. Nice handshake there, Nathan. But
was there a young nephew there? Was it one of the? I saw two young kids. Sorry, like teenage kids. Sorry, I'm so confused.
No, I'm sorry. I should have cleared that up. So throughout the trial, Brian has got 4 siblings. He's got 3 sisters and a brother, and his brother was in attendance the entire trial and at the verdict. And his sister was in attendance. His sister's called Beverly. She was in attendance for a lot of the trial, the first week. Mm-hmm. And then she was there at the verdict, and she's got a number of sons, I think 3.
One with like blondie hair. I think I saw them laughing and joking outside.
Tall with a beard.
It's like high school kids. I saw quite a few of them. Were they high school kids?
Yeah, there was some real transient people that crept through that courtroom at some point. Michael Murphy made an appearance for the Celeb Watchers Amongst Us. He's one of the
Who's
OG.
Michael Murphy?
Oh, he's one of the OG pastors from Hills Christian Life Centre. Well, or a year or so in. He was Brian's right-hand man for 11 years and most famously really Scott Morrison's pastor out there in Dublin.
So he was there as well.
Indeed. He's been a very vocal advocate and supporter of the former global senior high dragonfly poobah of Hillsong. Now, what wasn't thought about, though, was how devastatingly sickening the victory tour is going to be. I mean, you work in media and marketing. I think the Americans are going to lap up the idea of this pastor redeemed, you know.
I don't know. I told you earlier, I think
No. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm interested. What do you think? I think they'll love it. The old school, at the end of the day, he never lost sight, and he'll tell you, you know, he's never lost faith, and he only had one sleeping pill. He says a lot in the interview we'll listen to. So, what do you know? How do you think he'll be received from here on in? You're in touch as well than I am. So
I'm in touch with. I follow one of the most popular Christian. I've connected with them as well. They're actually very close friends to one of the people that spoke to in the Discovery Channel documentary that was made. And there's these influencers that run the Christian. I'm just talking about one specific one. They've got over, I think, 500,000 to 1 million subscribers, and they are of the notion that they're pretty much cancelling Hillsong. It's not because of the fact that we want to cancel Christianity, because we're Christians. We want to cancel this form of Christianity because I think we've all noticed that this has become extremely dangerous. And I think when the documents came out with the finances, and they also did an audit themselves and then discussed this with their audience. And I'm not speaking for that group of people who I won't name, but I'm just saying from my understanding from their videos that they've posted out, they've gone and said, we have to stop this. And I think that the new generation that's coming out, the Gen Zs and some of us are millennials as well, we are kind of sick of this kind of mega church phenomenon that's going on. We're really looking for authentic experiences and we no longer want this. The older people, of course, will all gather together. But I think that America is changing. You're definitely going to find people who are still going to love Brian, but definitely not at the level at where they were. The church has really damaged itself because of all the lies, you know. It's too many lies. And I think people are, yes, you're definitely going to get diehards, and you're always going to get diehards who are going to go, hey, this is like, there's nothing like Hillsong. And that's especially in places like Brazil and places like that, because they don't really know the extent of what's happened. They're really kind of removed from it. But in the States, I definitely think, you know, New York's church is not bustling anymore. That's a good indication from a target market perspective. It used to be the place to go to. You had Justin Bieber, you had Chris Pratt, and now, I mean, I was watching a comedian who is very pro Hillsong, and he's a famous comedian, and he went there. He's like, oh, it was so sad to him because it kind of felt like there was like 20, 30 people in the room.
Yeah, John Priest, we're disappointed in your output there. Everything else was funny until it happened to you and your friends.
Exactly. So from a marketing perspective, I think he'll be milking this. I was telling a journalist yesterday, he'll be milking the hell out of this the way that he knows best, because he's got great reality. He's like the Meghan Merkel of the church.
Yeah. I mean, and there's, you know, he'll manage to, as you'll hear, he manages to distance himself from, you know, the stuff he can't explain away, because that's a story for another day.
The thing is, like, I feel like today's Brian that we did see was a little bit more of a real Brian. There's certain parts of it that I think is we were a bit more authentic than the general scripted ones. Very scripted and maneuvered, but I feel like this might be very maneuvered as well. So you just don't know with them. You just can't take them by face value. I've just learned that since, knowing, not knowing them, but, being in the church and being close to them, and just knowing that this is how they are. I spoke to a friend the other day as well. I'll leave it at this, but we were talking about, how she was always like trying to escort Brian out because she was working with Brian closely on certain things, and how he was driving an Audi. And this was 10, 12 years ago. And she said she just couldn't take it that he was driving an Audi TT. And she always thought that it really bugged her. She was like, why is he driving such an expensive car? And she used to go to their house as well, and the expensive designer stuff. And she's not out there to get them or anything. She's actually like, positive about them. She's in a different space. But yeah, it was something that did bother her. So it's something that bothered all of us. But, so it's all those sorts of things that I just feel like, yeah. Anyway, we'll get into the video and then
this interview that we're about to listen to is it's on Sky News, which people know, but the interviewer is Andrew Bolt. How would you describe him to those people outside of the shores who aren't familiar with Mr. Bolt? Who would you compare him to?
To Andrew Bolt?
How do I describe Andrew Bolt to people?
Oh man, I don't even know myself, but I think conservative leaning, anti-leftist woke, that's how I would probably describe him as per usual. But he's also a bit of a complex character. He's a right wing. Yeah, Andrew Bolt is a right wing social political commentator.
Yeah. And I don't know, little Rush Limbaugh or what is he? A bit of Tucker Carlson kind of.
Not really. I think that Tucker Carlson was Alan Jones, yes. But I mean, in terms of who I usually listen to is Rita and Peter Credlin. I do have respect for listening to them because I think they do speak a lot of sense. And
I'm just trying to explain to people.
So Andrew Bolt, in I guess the American sense, I wouldn't say he's Tucker Carlson, but I guess he would be more like Fox News type of representative. Very similar type of way of dealing with issues. And yeah, he's a very conservative type of news, probably the more conservative that we will get in Australia compared to Channel 9, Channel 10 and so
on Sky News. Now, what is it of interest to you that, like, I don't know, we got talking about this afternoon and arrived at, decided to have this conversation. What kind of made you want to have a chat about it?
Well, I don't know. I found that when I looked at it, I felt all sorts of different emotions through it. And I felt conflicted. I guess I was conflicted about what they were saying in the interview. Because in the beginning, there were things that I actually really did agree from as a Christian perspective with Andrew Bolt about what's currently happening in the media. And I know we're on difficult political spectrums at times, but we still respect each other, Tanya. But what really did get to me, I guess, throughout the interview was this thing of painting Hillsong as the face of Christianity. Things like that, they were just sticking out to me. And the way that Brian definitely looks disheveled, but also then perks up at certain places. There's just, the whole thing just didn't sit right with me. Sky News actually asked me to interview with them about 5 months ago. And then they cancelled the interview. And I did find that really strange because I've never had that before. I've gone through so many different interviews. So it shows you that he's obviously known people inside of Sky. He feels connected to them. And the first people he would go to would be the people he feels most politically aligned to. And also where he's obviously needing to get the support from. He's needing to get the backing of Christians right now. So he's needing to, from somebody that works in PR, from PR strategy point of view, that is gold. You will be going to the other Christians and the Christians that have been rooting for you, and you want to line up their support. Politically, that is kind of exactly how things are done usually as well. So it's all strategy lined. I think what a lot of people don't understand is that these things are all extremely strategically planned out with lawyers and PR people, and nothing of this is authentic. It's all
I do think this was heavily edited, heavily scripted and rehearsed.
Yeah, you could see how he was looking to the side as well. And
I'll just read you a few comments before we start quickly. Under the YouTube posting from Sky News itself. And just 17 minutes ago, we've got, you cannot punish a son for his father's sins. Vindication was imminent. There's Hillsong Music, the message, sadly not. There's 9 minutes ago, the biggest criminal organisation on earth. Also, no smoke without fire, a showman, slick, monetised performer, chastened. What else have we got here? Just because right after they posted it, and
it's so funny for me because I'm just looking now, I'm just Googling this as well. I remember Paul Murray, because I listened to a lot of Paul Murray. He was actually quite shocked by a lot of the allegations that's recently come out. And he did a whole spectrum thing on it and going, it's really weird for me that this has happened in the church. And now we get this guy who's the polar opposite, and he's basically kissing the ground that Brian is walking on.
All right, let's take a listen. Because he starts off pretty clearly. Just let me know if there are any issues with sound.
I'll tell you another case of a Christian being vilified by the media, charged, dragged through the courts, and only when the damage is done, declared innocent. Declared innocent today.
Not guilty.
Houston, founder of Hillsong Church in Sydney. I'll talk to him in a second, but some background first. You can tell why Brian Houston became a hate figure for a media that seems so anti-Christian. He started this Pentecostal church in 1983 and turned it into almost a brand. In fact, Australia's biggest single church. To judge by the worshippers each week, people are attracted by its relaxed style, its music, and of course, Houston's preaching. Wow.
Okay, so he founded the church. Was almost a brand. I mean, Mumbrella named it one of the strongest brands, or the brand of the year, I think, strongest brand of the year a few years back. So
it's a marketing genius. Yeah.
So the words have been so carefully chosen in this thing. I mean, Houston's preaching himself. PCD said on this very pod a couple of weeks ago that Brian used to bore people into submission. But here we go.
It's preaching. And I believe tonight that there will be the saint of forgiveness. As church was so successful that Prime Minister Scott Morrison, self-Pentecostal, went to it to be interviewed by Houston. And the church expanded globally to the United States and nearly 30 other countries, but it all went bad for Houston. 24 years ago, his father, Frank, now dead, told his son had sexually abused a boy, 7 years old at the time, in 1970. And Houston did not go to the police. He said the victim, by then in his late 30s, had told him he did not want police told. Had not told police himself, and he was an adult. And that victim now says, well, I didn't say that, and police charged Houston with concealing the crime to protect his church. And today, the magistrate, though, hearing the case, said, no, Houston did have a reasonable excuse under the law not to tell authorities. He knew or believed on reasonable grounds that the victim did not want this matter reported to police. Brian Houston joined me a short while ago. Brian Houston, thank you so much for your time. How did it get to this, you being charged when the magistrate says you were just doing what the victim wanted?
Well, I think that's a big question. And unfortunately, it's been taking 25 years for that to finally know the answer.
25 years. You said outside the court today you were the victim of a targeted attack. What do you mean by that?
Well, I genuinely believe that if it wasn't Brian Houston from Hillsong Church, this charge would never have happened. So,
I just want to take a moment to say that 25 years ago, which is now starting this whole Camelot narrative, is when he first was informed, according to the, as much as we know in history, that his father had committed child sexual offences, or at least offence at that point, and not long after that, his father Frank confessed when confronted. So that's where the 25-year mark thing is. It's very interesting, this language.
I just find it kind of disgusting that there is this type of victim shaming in this. It makes me sick. Honestly, I just listened to it again. It's the second time now. But when I heard him say, but the victim didn't, does anybody really understand how hard it is for a male, females as well, but especially for a male, and especially in a dominant society that we have. And I'm actually I'm more center-left, right-wing kind of person. And I'm saying that this is a very difficult thing for somebody to go and say, hey, I've been sexually abused or essayed. I've been essayed.
The casualness. So casually cruel.
It's not just that. It's the wording and the almost mocking tone of this reporter of saying that, oh, he's a big boy. He should have basically just gone to the cops. I don't think people know how Hillsong works as well. Hillsong is extremely high. They're extremely gaslighting. The way I've got friends that were physically abused, and one friend that alleges that she was raped by another pastor in the church, and I believe it. So I honestly think that people don't understand that how difficult this is, and yeah, a lot of people are probably not going to listen to this podcast, that are from that Christian perspective, that are praising Brian.
Probably not listening right now.
Yeah, exactly. But they should actually be. Hopefully by some grace of God, they'll figure it out. But the point is that this is somebody who's lost their whole identity as a human being, their dignity.
And just before we continue, the day one, it was announced in the trial that Brett Sengstock had the option of anonymity through this, and he had waived that for the trial.
And there are more people as well that we know of. We know that, it's quite public knowledge.
There were a number of victims that presented, plus the victims in New Zealand. So the DPP chose, for whatever reasons, we don't know right now, but to focus on this one instance. Perhaps that's the only evidence that they could rely on. I don't know the processes, but, certainly there were, even Brian would say, infinite, unknowable numbers of victims. However, this case centered on one, and one instance in particular. And, that's how a lot of cases work, where people might have been abused multiple times, but they're going with one.
Yeah.
It's interesting what his breathing is like through this as well. Like his lips.
Yeah.
Child could never have happened. So many people were aware of the accusations about my father before I was, and none of them had anything in fact about it. I was the one who confronted my father.
It's so interesting how this has been constructed.
Okay.
I was the one who confronted my father, and I end up being the one many years later getting charged.
You know what? I have listened to this part. This is going to be probably unpopular opinion on this matter, but I think that the Houstons have committed other crimes that are more as bad as this sounds. And I do want to have I have great respect for what Brett has gone through, and I want justice for him. But the fact is that, his father molested. So it's also very difficult probably for this person on that side sitting there. And I have to put myself be there as well towards Brian. I think he probably did put himself in front of, going to the courts and going, so we know that how gaslighting Hillsong is, and they've all learned this. But I don't know. I can't fully judge this person on the full extent of his actions, not understanding, the difficulty of probably finding out as well that you have a dad that is a serial rapist or a child rape, a pedophile. This is tough stuff.
To whom much is given. I'm sorry. If I wasn't Brian Houston, this wouldn't have happened to me. Yeah, and a whole
no. But he should have done the right thing. Like, there's no 2 points about this. This guy is bad to the core, right? Because he's learned from the worst. But what I'm just saying is that it's not his worst crime.
Can't he go for the concealing and the tax evasion and the fraud and the misappropriation?
Why is that not on the books? Why are we just discussing this issue that he's this is a minor issue in the court system, the legal system.
Oh,
It's from a cold fact situation, you know.
I mean, it's funny you should say that. It seems, and it's been portrayed as this kind of minor, musty, old, weird, strange, pulled out of nowhere for no reason kind of crime. But, you know, as we know, it takes a village to raise a predator. You know, without the people looking away and making excuses and shredding those documents, perpetrators wouldn't be able to continue perpetrating.
But